Hey, we're live and recording. Thanks for joining today.
Good morning, everyone. We're so thrilled to be back with our morning book buzz. We've missed you. I am Jen Childs, and I'm happy to be here to buzz some of my favorite upcoming books with you. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Liz Camfiord. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Maureen Meekins.
And just our usual reminder that you'll see on the slides, there'll be a key so you know all the amazing formats that our books are available in. We've got something for every format lover. Also, the orange E indicates if there's an e-galley available. And if there isn't one, don't fret, one will soon be coming, so just continue to check back.
It's tomorrow, so hopefully you've registered for Day of Dialogue tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you haven't, there's still time. We have a wonderful range of authors attending, and it'll just be spectacular. Riley Sager will be there, Lauren Groff, Isabel Allende, Lori Moore unfortunately cannot join us, but Teju Cole will be there, and many, many more.
And another one to register for is our upcoming Library Lunch and Learn Arts Edition on Thursday, June 1st at 1 p.m. And you can RSVP at the link on the slide, and it'll also be included in the wrap up for you.
And just because we know that you never get tired of author programming, we've got plenty for you. We have an amazing program that our colleagues have put together for AAPI communities and conversation. This is going to be a wonderful virtual event that is timed to the New York Book Show. There's free registration for librarians. We have, as you can see on the slide, an amazing lineup of authors. So we hope you will register for this as well. And again, the registration link's on the slide, but everything will be sent to you in the wrap up. So no need to jot everything down if you want to just be patient and wait for it.
And in case you missed it, we were very busy last week celebrating National Library Week. And this is just a glimpse of some of our fun social media posts in honor of you, the librarians and library staff across the country, thanking you for the vital work you do in our libraries and communities. And of course, your great taste in books with our librarian staff picks. So be sure to check it out and follow us on our social channels at PRH Library.
Great. And now on to the books.
So it's May, and we're kicking off this morning book buzz with some unforgettable reads in celebration of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I'm going to start with Almost Brown, where award-winning writer Charlotte Gill retraces her dysfunctional biracial globetrotting family's journey as she reckons with ethnicity and belonging, diversity and race, and the complexities of life within a multicultural household. Her father is Indian, her mother is English, and eventually her parents drift apart because they aren't compatible, but she finds herself also distancing herself from her father like her mother does. And she wonders, why is she embarrassed to walk down the street with him and not her mom? And she doesn't know if it's because of his personality or his race. And as a mixed race child, was this her own unconscious bias favoring one parent over the other in the racial tug of war that plagues society? This is a funny, turbulent, and ultimately heartwarming story. Gill examines the brilliant messiness of ancestry, diversity, and the idea of race, a historical concept that still informs our beliefs about ethnicity today. It's for readers who loved Mira Jacobs' Good Talk, Alexander Chee's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel, All You Can Ever Know by Nicole Chung, and Black is the Body by Emily Bernard.
And then we have Holding Patterns. So this is the debut novel from acclaimed poet Jenny Z. She has been a finalist for the National Book Award twice over, most recently last year for her collection Eye Level. But here she's written a novel that's a wonderful mother-daughter story. It will appeal to fans of Wei Wang's Chemistry or Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen Ho. It's set in Oakland, California, and it's a slightly satirical look at startups, at influencers, and the boom and bust cycles of Silicon Valley. It also reminded me of Happy for You by Claire Stanford, if you've read that. Here we meet Kathleen Chang. She's moved back into her childhood home after a bad breakup, having left her graduate program, etc. Her life is falling apart. To her surprise, and she moves back in with her mother. To her surprise, her mother, Marissa, is no longer the depressed, desperate to return to China mother who she remembers. Instead, she's sporty and has been transformed by love. Kathleen thought that she would be planning her own wedding at this time. Instead, she finds herself helping her mother plan hers to a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur. So Kathleen takes a job that specializes, this is the interesting part, in an unconventional form of therapy based on touch. She has an unforeseen attachment to someone at her new job, which really makes her rethink her relationships, especially the one with her mother. And the question is, will they succeed in seeing each other anew, adult to adult? So Jenny's originally from Shanghai, but she lives in Brooklyn now. And Weike Wang gave her this wonderful review saying there is so much heart in these pages, so much wisdom on how we love. This book had me in its orbit from beginning to end.
Next up, I'm not going to lie, I had to look up how to pronounce this author's name, Juna. And while doing so, I came up with a really interesting author bio, which I'll share with you. You may or may not know this, but Juna is a novelist and film critic, former head of the Korean Science Fiction Writers Union. For more than 20 years, they have published Juna as a faceless writer, refusing to reveal personal details regarding age, gender, or legal name. Juna is widely considered to be one of South Korea's most important science fiction writers. And the new book, Counterweight, takes place on the fictional island of Patasan, and much to the ire of the Patasan natives, the Korean conglomerate LK is constructing an elevator into Earth's orbit, gradually turning the one-time tropical resort town into a teeming travel hub, a gateway to and from our planet. Up in space, holding the elevator's spider cable taut, is a mass of space junk known as the Counterweight. And stashed within that junk is a trove of crucial data, a memory fragment left by LK's former CEO, the control of which will determine the company's and humanity's future. So racing up the elevator to retrieve the data is a host of rival forces. Mac, the novel's narrator and LK's chief of external affairs, increasingly disillusioned with his employer. The everyman Choi Gang-woo, unwittingly at the center of Mac's investigations, the former CEO's brilliant niece and power-hungry son, and Rex Tamaki, a violent officer in LK's security division. Conceived by Juna as a low-budget science fiction film with literary references as wide-ranging as Joseph Conrad and the Marquis de Sade, Counterweight is part cyberpunk, part hard-boiled detective fiction, and part parable of South Korea's neo-colonial ambition and its rippling effects. And then next up is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. We didn't call the police right away. Those are the electric first words of Happiness Falls, an extraordinary novel about a biracial Korean-American family in Virginia whose lives are upended when their beloved father and husband goes missing. Mia, the irreverent, hyper-analytical 20-year-old daughter, has an explanation for everything, which is why she isn't initially concerned when her father and younger brother Eugene don't return from a walk in a nearby park. They must have lost their phone or stopped for an errand somewhere. But by the time Mia's brother runs through the front door bloody and alone, it becomes clear that the father in this tight-knit family is missing, and the only witness is Eugene, who has the rare genetic condition Angelman syndrome and cannot speak. What follows is both a ticking clock investigation into the whereabouts of a father and an emotionally rich portrait of a family whose most personal secrets just may be at the heart of his disappearance. Full of shocking twists, fascinating questions of love, language, and human connection, Happiness Falls is a mystery, a family drama, and a novel of profound philosophical inquiry. With all the powerful storytelling she brought to her award-winning debut, Miracle Creek, Angie Kim turns the missing person story into something wholly original, creating an indelible tale of a family who must go to remarkable lengths to truly understand one another.
And then we have Land of Milk and Honey. So this is the second much anticipated novel from C. Pam Zhang, whose How Much of These Hills is Gold was longlisted for the Booker Prize and was also one of Barack Obama's favorite books of 2020. Pam is currently a Cullman Fellow at the New York Public Library. So as the story opens here, a smog has spread. Food crops are rapidly disappearing, and a young chef is escaping her dying career in a dreary city to take a job at a decadent mountaintop colony, seemingly free of the world's troubles. There, the sky is clear, rare ingredients abound, and her enigmatic employer and his visionary daughter have built a lush new life for the global elite, one that reawakens the chef to the pleasures of taste, touch, and her own body. This is a very sensual novel and a love letter to food, really. It's in this atmosphere that she's pushed to the center of a startling attempt to reshape the world far beyond the plate. So Roxane Gay says that the way Zhang writes about food and desire and human failings is exquisite. It's a provocative novel about the ethics of seeking pleasure in a dying world.
And last here, we have a harrowing and redemptive immigrant story that's for readers of Pachinko. In Straw Dogs of the Universe by Yi Chun, a Chinese railroad worker and his young daughter sold into servitude in 19th century California search for family, fulfillment, and belonging in a violent new land. After her village is devastated by famine, 10-year-old 6 Yang is sold to a human trafficker for a bag of rice and 6 silver coins. Her mother is reluctant to let her go, but the promise of a better life for her beloved daughter ultimately sways her. Arriving in America with the profits from her sale and a single photograph of her absent father, 6 Yang journeys across an unfamiliar American landscape in the hopes of reuniting her family. As she makes her way through an unforgiving new world, her father, a railroad worker in California, finds his attempts to build a life for himself both upended and defined by a long-lost love and the seemingly inescapable violence of the American West. A generational saga ranging from the villages of China to the establishment of the Transcontinental Railroad and the anti-Chinese movement in California, Straw Dogs of the Universe considers the tenacity of family ties and the courage it takes to survive in a country that rejects you, even as it relies upon your labor. This book will appeal to readers of Krista Tippett and Mary Oliver.
And then we have Starve Acre. So Starve Acre, sorry, I have to find my note for Starve Acre. This is a horror novel. It's a kind of a folky horror novel. It's about the depths of grief found in an ancient farm in northern England. What a great setting. And it's soon to be a motion picture starring Matt Smith of The Crown and also Morfydd Clark from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So as the story begins here, the worst thing possible has happened. Richard and Juliet Willoughby's son, Ewan, has died suddenly at the age of 5. Starve Acre, their house by the moors, was to be full of life, but now it's become a haunted place. Convinced Ewan still lives there in some form, Juliet seeks the help of the Beacons, a seemingly benevolent group of occultists. Richard, to try and keep the boy out of his mind, has turned his attention to the field opposite the house, where he patiently digs the barren dirt in search of a legendary oak tree. But as they delve further into their grief, both uncover more than they set out to. So Andrew Michael Hurley's first novel, Valoni, won the Costa Prize, And he's got a really enthralling blend of nature writing. He's an exquisite nature writer and horror. And the setting of this is so atmospheric. His writing has won him praise from the likes of Stephen King.
As a big horror fan, I'm very excited about this entire slide. And of course, the next book, Burn the Negative by Josh Winning. In this incendiary mashup of horror and suspense, a notorious slasher film is remade, and the curse that haunted it is reawakened. Arriving in LA to visit the set of a new streaming horror series, journalist Laura Warren witnesses a man jumping from a bridge, landing right before her car. Here we go, she thinks. It has started because the series she's reporting on is a remake of a 90s horror flick, a cursed 90s horror flick, which she starred in as a child, and it's been ruining her life. In the guest house, Laura played the little girl with the terrifying gift to tell people how the Needle Man would kill them. When 8 of the cast and crew died in ways that eerily mirrored the movie's on-screen deaths, the film became a cult classic, but destroyed her. Leaving it behind, Laura changed her name, her accent, dyed her hair, moved across the Atlantic, but some scripts don't want to stay buried. Now, as the body count rises again, Laura finds herself on the run with her aspiring actress sister and a jaded psychic, hoping to end the curse once and for all and to stay out of the Needleman's lethal reach. Author Josh Winning is a senior film writer at Radio Times, a writer for Total Film, and the co-host of movie podcast Torn Stubs. He knows this world that he writes, and he brings it to the page with enthusiasm, energy, and specificity. Burn the Negative is a slick, twisty, and smart horror novel that's perfect for fans of Riley Sager, Alma Katsu, and Grady Hendrix.
No, no, no. I can't do it. Next up is Fever House. When legbreaker Hutch Holtz rolls up to a rundown apartment complex in Portland, Oregon to collect overdue drug money, a severed hand is the last thing he expects to find stashed in the client's refrigerator. Hutch quickly realizes that the hand induces uncontrollable madness. Anyone in its proximity is overcome with a boundless compulsion for violence. Within hours, catastrophic forces are set into motion. Dark op government agents who have been desperately hunting for the hand are on Hutch's tail. More of the city's residents fall under its brutal influence, and suddenly all of Portland stands at the precipice of a disaster. But it's all the same for Catherine Moriarty, a singer whose sudden fame and precipitous downfall were followed by the mysterious death of her estranged husband, suicide allegedly. Her trauma has made her agoraphobic, shackled within the confines of her apartment. Her son Nick has moved home to care for her, quietly making his living, working for Hutch's boss. When Hutch calls Nick in distress, looking for someone else to take the hand, Catherine and Nick are plunged into a global struggle that will decimate the walls of the carefully arranged life they've built. Mother and son must evade both crazed, bloodthirsty masses and deceitful government agents while exercising family secrets that have risen from the dead. Secrets they soon discover that might hold the very key to humanity's survival.
And next is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas, where vampires and vaqueros face off on the Texas-Mexico border in a supernatural Western. This is very exciting. I love Westerns, and I think taking this and putting that setting to this is just phenomenal. And if you saw Isabel Cañas at our festival recently, she talks about this and really brings it home, and her video is on our YouTube channel. That's a whole other thing, but I suggest you watch it. She's wonderful. As the daughter of a rancher in 1840 Mexico, Nina knows a thing or two about monsters. Her home has long been threatened by tensions with Anglo settlers from the north. But something more sinister lurks near the ranch at night, something that drains men of their blood and leaves them for dead. something that once attacked Nina 9 years ago. Believing Nina dead, Nestor has been on the run from his grief ever since, moving from ranch to ranch, working as a vaquero. But no amount of drink can dispel the night terrors of sharp teeth. No woman can erase his childhood sweetheart from his mind. When the United States invades Mexico in 1846, the two are brought abruptly together on the road to war. But the shock of their reunion is quickly overshadowed by the appearance of a nightmare made flesh. And unless Nina and Nestor work through their past and face the future together, neither will survive to see the dawn. This book is full of lush, atmospheric writing, supernatural chills, and an aching romance. What more could you want? It's a perfect recommendation for your patrons who loved Mexican Gothic.
Mm. What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is a supernatural horror novel. It's got a Southern Gothic twist. And if this doesn't hook you, I don't know what will. It's like Nicholas Sparks gone wrong, according to the editor.
That's my kind of book.
Isn't it? Never heard that before. Here we meet Maddie Price, who, after striking out on her own as a teen mom, returns to her hometown of Brandywine, Virginia, with her 17-year-old daughter and nothing to her name. She's making a meager living as a palm reader at the local farmer's market. There she reconnects with an old high school flame, enter Nicholas Sparks, Henry McCabe, now a reclusive local fisherman whose infant son Skylar went missing 5 years ago. I'm sorry that I'm presenting the missing and dead children books, but everyone in town believes Skylar is dead, but when Maddie reads Henry's palm, she's haunted by strange and disturbing visions that suggest otherwise. As she follows the thread of these visions, Maddie discovers a terrifying nightmare waiting at the center of the labyrinth, and it's coming for everyone she holds dear. You may recognize this author as the author of Ghost Eaters, which was a really popular book. And also he has a horror podcast called Quiet Part Loud, and that's from Jordan Peele's production company Monkey Paw. He's also developing a psychological horror anthology series for Amazon with the creators of Westworld, and he's just got an amazing following, and this should be a really spooky book. It's from Quirk Books. Thank you.
Next up, from the internationally best-selling author Yonezbo, a chilling, fresh spin on the classic horror novel. When the voices call, don't answer. In the wake of his parents' tragic deaths in a house fire, 14-year-old Richard Eleved has been sent to live with his aunt and uncle in the remote insular town of Ballantine. Richard quickly earns a reputation as an outcast, and when a classmate named Tom goes missing, everyone suspects the new angry boy is responsible for his disappearance. No one believes him when he says the telephone booth out by the edge of the woods sucked Tom into the receiver like something out of a horror movie. No one, that is, except Karen, a beguiling fellow outsider who encourages Richard to pursue clues the police refuse to investigate. He traces the number that Tom prank called from the phone booth to an abandoned house in the Black Mirror Wood. There he catches a glimpse of a terrifying face in the window, and then the voices begin to whisper in his ear. You know who I am. She's going to burn. The one you love is going to burn, and there's not a thing you can do about it. When another classmate disappears, Richard must find a way to prove his innocence and preserve his sanity as he grapples with the dark magic that is possessing Ballantine and pursuing his destruction. Then again, Richard may not be the most reliable narrator of his own story. ...
Mm-hmm.
Jen, those theatrics were so good.
Thank you.
Like a campfire. We're around a
Yeah,
campfire.
I was like, oh, what's happening next?
And that actually, I'm not big on horror, but that actually did like hook me a little.
It does. It does. All right, and we know that you're always looking for your next book club picks. So we're highlighting some of our favorite book club authors that have new books coming out. And I'm starting with Half-Life of a Stolen Sister by Rachel Cantor, in which she reimagines the lives of the Bronte siblings, from their precocious childhoods to the writing of their great novels to their early deaths. How did sisters Emily, Charlotte, and Anne write literary landmarks, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, and Agnes Grey? What in their lives and circumstances, in the choices they made, and in their close but complex relationships with one another made such greatness possible? As it tells the story of the Brontes, Half-Life of a Stolen Sister itself perpetually transforms and renews its own style and methods, sometimes hewing close to the facts of the Bronte lives as we know them, or we think we know them, and at others radically reimagining the siblings, moving them into new time periods and possibilities. Chapter by chapter, the novel brings together diaries, letters, home movies, television and radio interviews, deathbed monologues, and fragments from the sprawling invented worlds of the siblings' childhood. As it does so, a kaleidoscopic portrait emerges, giving us with startling intensity and invention new ways of seeing and reading the sisters who would create some of the most supreme works of literature of all time. So this book is, of course, for fans of the Bronte sisters, but it's also much more. It's experimental, it's form-shattering, and provokingly philosophical. It's perfect for book clubs and for readers of Tim O'Brien and Gina Apostle.
For the next one, I feel like I really only have to say a new book by Colson Whitehead, but I'm going to give him the time he deserves because he is definitely one of our favorite authors. Here he returns, the two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning author, with Crook Manifesto, where he is continuing his Harlem saga that he began in Harlem Shuffle. This is a powerful and hugely entertaining novel that summons 1970s New York in all its seedy glory. It's 1971. Trash piles up on the street. Crime is at an all-time high. The city is careening towards bankruptcy, and a shooting war has broken out between the NYPD and the Black Liberation Army. Amidst this collective nervous breakdown, furniture store owner and ex-fence Ray Carney tries to keep his head down and his business thriving. His days moving stolen goods around the city are over. It's strictly the straight and narrow for him. Until he needs Jackson 5 tickets for his daughter May. And then he decides to hit up his old police contact Munson, fixer extraordinaire. But Munson has his own favors to ask Carney, and staying out of the game gets a lot more complicated and deadly. Fast forward to 1973. The counterculture has created a new generation. The old ways are being overthrown, but there is one constant. Pepper, Carney's endearingly violent partner in crime. It's getting harder to put together a reliable crew for hijackings, heists, and assorted felonies. So Pepper takes on a side gig doing security on a blaxploitation shoot in Harlem. He finds himself in a freaky world of Hollywood stars, up-and-coming comedians, and celebrity drug dealers, in addition to the usual cast of hustlers, mobsters, and hitmen. These adversaries underestimate the seasoned crook, to their regret. Fast forward to 1976. Harlem is burning, block by block, while the whole country is gearing up for the bicentennial celebrations. Carney is trying to come up with a July 4th ad that he can live with. 200 years of getting away with it? While his wife Elizabeth is campaigning for her childhood friend, the former assistant DA and rising political Alexander Oakes. When a fire severely injures one of Carney's tenants, he enlists Pepper to look into who may be behind it. Our crooked duo have to battle their way through a crumbling metropolis run by the shady, the violent, and the utterly corrupted. Crook Manifesto is a darkly funny tale of a city under siege, but also, sneakily, a searching portrait of the meaning of family. Colson Whitehead's kaleidoscopic portrait of Harlem is sure to stand as one of the all-time great evocations of a place and a time. And then next up, another, coincidentally, um, return for a trilogy writer um, with Somebody's Fool by Richard Russo. The Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Empire Falls returns to North Bath in upstate New York and to the characters that captured the hearts and imaginations of millions of readers in his beloved bestseller, Nobody's Fool and Everybody's Fool. Somebody's Fool takes place 10 years after the death of the magnetic Donald Sully Sullivan. The town of North Bath is going through a major transition as it's annexed by its much wealthier neighbor, Schuler Springs. Peter, Sully's son, is still grappling with his father's tremendous legacy as well as his relationship to his own son Thomas, wondering if he has been all that different a father than Sully was to him. Meanwhile, the town's newly consolidated police department falls into the hands of Charisse Bond after the resignation of Doug Raymer, the former North Bath police chief and Charisse's ex-lover. When a decomposing body turns up in the abandoned hotel situated between the two towns, Charisse and Raymer are drawn together again and forced to address their complicated attraction to one another. Across town, Ruth, Sully's married ex-lover, and her daughter Janie struggle to understand Janie's daughter Tina and her growing obsession with Peter's other son, Will. Amidst the turmoil, the town's residents speculate on the identity of the unidentified body and wonder who among their number could have disappeared unnoticed. Infused with all the wry humor and shrewd observations that Russo is known for, Somebody's Fool is another classic from a modern master.
So next up, I feel so privileged to present a new James McBride novel. I will read anything that he writes. His whole career has been with Riverhead Books at Penguin Random House, from The Color of Water, which was his debut memoir. And this book, this novel, borrows some from that memoir and his life. He's the author of the Oprah Book Club pick, Deacon King Kong, which I can attest is a really great book club pick. My book club was in awe of it. So I highly recommend that if you're looking for some book club recommendations, as well as, of course, this, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. He's, as you know, won the National Book Award for The Good Lord Bird. And this is, as I said, somewhat drawn from inspired by his life as the son of a Black father who was a minister and a white mother who was the daughter of a rabbi. So here we are in 1972 when the workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania were digging the foundations for a new development. The last thing they expected to find was a skeleton at the bottom of a well. Who the skeleton was and how it got there were two of the long-held secrets kept by the residents of Chicken Hill. This is the neighborhood that this novel is set in. It's a dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side. Chicken Hill was where Masha and Chana Ludlow lived when Masha integrated his theater and where Chona ran the Heaven and Earth grocery store. When the state came looking for a deaf boy to institutionalize him, it was Chona and Nate Timblin, the Black janitor at Masha's theater and unofficial leader of the Black community on Chicken Hill, who worked together to keep the boys safe. So you can see some threads from Deacon King Kong as well. When the truth is finally revealed about what happened on Chicken Hill and the part the town's white establishment played in it, McBride shows us that even in dark times, it's love and community, heaven and earth that sustain us. There's also an element of Nickel Boys in this by Colson Whitehead's novel. So just a fantastic book for book clubs. And then we have something new from Zadie Smith. It's her first historical novel, The Fraud. Fans have been waiting 7 years since her last novel, Swing Time. It would be great for fans and readers of Sarah Waters. This is set against the legal trial that divided Victorian England. Here we turn to 1873. Mrs. Eliza Touche is the Scottish housekeeper and cousin by marriage of a once famous novelist, now in decline, William Ainsworth, with whom she has lived for 30 years. Mrs. Touche is a woman of many interests: literature, justice, abolitionism, class, her cousin, his wives, and this life and the next. But she's also quite skeptical. She suspects her cousin of having no talent, his successful friend, Mr. Charles Dickens, of being a bully and a moralist, and England of being a land of facades in which nothing is quite what it seems. Enter Andrew Bogle, who grew up enslaved on the Hope Plantation in Jamaica. He knows that every lump of sugar comes at a human cost, that the rich deceive the poor, and when he finds himself in London as a star witness in the celebrated case of imposture, he knows his future depends on telling the right story. The Tichborne trial, wherein a lower class butcher from Australia claimed he was in fact the rightful heir of a sizable estate and title, captivates Mrs. Touche and all of England. Is Sir Roger Tichborne really who he says he is, or is he a fraud?
North Woods is a daring, moving tale of memory and fate from the Pulitzer Prize finalist and author of The Piano Tuner and The Winter Soldier, Daniel Mason. When a pair of young lovers abscond from a Puritan colony, little do they know that their humble cabin in the woods will become home to an extraordinary succession of inhabitants: an English soldier, a pair of spinster twins, a crime reporter, a lovelorn painter, a con man, a stalking panther, a lusty beetle. And as each one confronts the mysteries of the North Woods, they come to realize that the dark, beautiful past is very much alive. Traversing cycles of history, nature, and even literature, North Woods shows the myriad magical ways in which we are connected to our environment and to one another across time, language, and space. Written along with the seasons and divided into the 12 months of the year, it's an unforgettable novel about secrets and fates that asks the timeless question, how do we live on even after we're gone? It's perfect for readers of Hamnet, Lincoln in the Bardo, Cloud Atlas, and Horse. And moving on, we have some incredible, inspiring stories of identity and survival. Then I will start with The Watchmakers by Harry Lenga and Scott Lenga, an extraordinary memoir told through interviews. Harry Lenga was born to a family of Hasidic Jews in Poland. The proud sons of a watchmaker, Harry and his two brothers, Malik and Moish, studied their father's trade at a young age. Upon the German invasion of Poland, when the Lenga family was upended, Harry and his brothers never anticipated that the tools acquired from their father would be the key to their survival. Under the most devastating conditions imaginable, with death always imminent, fixing watches for the Germans in the ghettos and brutal slave labor camps of occupied Poland and Austria bought their lives over and over again. From Wallenau and Starachowitza to Auschwitz and Abensi, Harry, Malik, and Moish endured, bartered, worked, prayed, and lived to see liberation. Derived from more than a decade of interviews with Harry Lenga, conducted by his own son, Scott, and a few others, The Watchmakers is Harry's heartening and unflinchingly honest first-person account of his childhood, the lessons learned from his own father, his tribulations, and his inspiring life before, during, and after the war. It's a singular and vital story told from one generation to the next, and a profoundly moving tribute to brotherhood, fatherhood, family, and faith.
Next is The Country of the Blind, a memoir at the end of sight by Andrew Leland. This is a witty personal narrative of the author's transition from sightedness to blindness and his quest to learn all about blindness as a rich culture all its own. So here we meet Andrew as he's suspended in a state of the soon-to-be blind. He's midway through his life with retinitis pigmentosa. He grew up with full vision, but starting in his teenage years, his sight began to degrade from the outside in, such that he now sees the world as if through a narrow tube. Soon, but without knowing exactly when, he will likely have no vision left. Full of apprehension, but also curiosity, Leland embarks on this sweeping exploration of the state of being that awaits him, not only the physical experience of blindness, but also its language, politics, and customs. He negotiates his changing relationships with his wife and son, and with his own sense of self as he moves from his mainstream typical life to one with a disability. Part memoir, part historical and cultural investigation. This, The Country of the Blind, represents Leland's determination not to merely survive the transition, but to grow from it. His is a celebrated voice on disability. He's written about it for numerous outlets. He's been in the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, and McSweeney's. And this quote from Dave Eggers is perfectly put. This is such a gorgeous book, the deeply touching story of how he, his wife Lily, and his son Oscar face their myriad new challenges with open minds and abundant wit, and always fearlessly together.
When Your Back's Against the Wall is by Michael Oher with Don Yeager. Oher is the NFL champion whose life inspired the hit movie The Blind Side, and millions of people became a part of his story when they watched that version of him on the big screen and read his memoir, I Beat the Odds, or cheered him on from the stands. But after speaking to so many of them over the years, he knows now that more than anything, people want to believe great things can happen, even when the situation looks bleak. And his story of overcoming the toughest of odds serves as their hope. Oher's life has had a lot of unexpected highs: a college degree, 2 beautiful, healthy children, and a happy marriage, drafted in the first round, a Super Bowl victory, and a second chance to play in the big game. But he's also run up against quite a few walls: poverty, hunger, homelessness, struggles in school, bullying, job loss, brain injury, anxiety, and depression. What he knows now is that your wall can be your opportunity. And in this book, he offers encouragement and shows readers how to get back up again and again and again. And this is an inspiring and motivating book on overcoming those obstacles, no matter how tough the odds. Oh, and this is also me. From the New York Times contributing opinion writer and award-winning author of Reading While Black comes How Far to the Promised Land, a riveting intergenerational account of his family's search for meaning and a place to call home in the American South. For much of his life, Esau Macaulay was taught to see himself as an exception, someone who, through hard work, faith, and determination, overcame childhood poverty, anti-Black racism, and an absent father to earn a job as a university professor and a life in the middle class. This account was the one he was conditioned to give, the story America demands from Black survivors. But when preparing the eulogy at his estranged father's funeral, Macaulay was forced to re-examine and face the shortcomings of that narrative about his own path to prosperity. No one escapes poverty. It marks us. He came to see that people, even those who harm us, are more complicated than the roles that we create for them in our imagination. The way to the promised land is not a trip from poverty to success, but the journey to finding beauty even in dark places. Macaulay chronicles his lifelong effort to understand the community that shaped him and the struggle they endured to make a home for their loved ones. Along the way, Macaulay raises questions that implicate us all. What does each person's struggle to build a life, regardless of its outcome, teach us about what it means to be human? Where might God be found in trauma and miracle that is Black life in the American South? Written with profound honesty and compassion, How Far to the Promised Land is a weighty examination of our most pressing societal issues that hope that keeps us alive. This book will appeal to your patrons who read Ta-Nehisi Coates, Austin Channing Brown, Brian Stevenson, and Imani Perry.
In Two Roads Home, beloved British journalist Daniel Finkelstein tells the extraordinary story of the years before his mother met his father, years of war and trials that they barely survived. Daniel's grandfather was a German Jewish intellectual leader who told an early warning of the impending Holocaust and became an archivist of Nazi crimes. He relocated his family to safety in Amsterdam, where they knew Anne Frank. But in those years, safety was an illusion. Anne Frank famously went into hiding, and Daniel's mother, Miriam, also still a child, was sent to Bergen-Belsen with her mother and sisters. Finkelstein's father, Ludwig, grew up in a prosperous Jewish family in Poland, where his father was a patriotic hero of the Great War. But when Stalin took control, Dolu was deported to Siberia, and Ludwig and his mother were sentenced to forced labor in Kazakhstan, starved, and housed in stable and freezing conditions. Two Roads Home is a page-turning account of the narrow escapes, forged passports, ingenuity, bravery, and luck that allowed Miriam and Ludwig to survive the war and find each other. Using their personal testimony, letters sent to Siberia, a diary written in Belsen, and years of historical research, Daniel Finkelstein tells the story of what happened to two families, one the victim of the Nazis, the other of the Soviets. A tale of deliverance and triumph over evil, Two Roads Home will profoundly touch all who read it. And then finally, another heartbreaking book, Fear is Just a Word. It begins on an international bridge between Mexico and the United States as a 56-year-old woman named Miriam Rodriguez stalks one of the men she believes was involved in the murder of her daughter Karen. He is her target number 11 and a member of the drug cartel that has terrorized Miriam's once quiet hometown of San Fernando, almost 100 miles from the U.S. border. Having dyed her hair red, and as a disguise and staying just out of sight, Miriam orchestrates the arrest of this man, holding him until police come and exacting her own version of justice. Even though Miriam had paid ransom money she could not afford in hopes of saving Karen, her daughter was never returned. Finally, with no other options, Miriam decided that fear is just a word, and she began a bold campaign to track down Karen's killers and then to create a community to help other victimized families pursue justice. This is one mother's extraordinary story, but Karen Rodriguez is just one of the many people who have disappeared. This book also charts the history of how cartels built their control in Mexico over many years, escalating the use of violence as messaging and dominance, and how, for money, control, and intimidation, hundreds of victims have been kidnapped and murdered. Propulsively readable, deeply researched, and brilliantly written, Fear is Just a Word is an unforgettable and moving portrait of a woman, a town, and a country, and of what can happen when violent forces gain power in a nation, leaving people to seek justice on their own.
So we wanted to highlight 4 upcoming audiobooks, a range of topics here, but really wonderful audiobooks for your patrons, beginning with Hotel 21. This is by Senta Rich, read by Jessie Cave. It's a debut novel from film and TV writer Senta. It's warm-hearted. It would be perfect for fans of The Maid by Nita Prose. And listeners will love meeting and rooting for Hotel 21's protagonist, Noelle, who's an unforgettable narrator, a friendly hotel cleaner, except she can't help but take souvenirs from the rooms she cleans. As she begins work at her 21st hotel, she's determined to last longer than her record of 1 month in the job. Her new colleagues make her wonder what it might be like to have true friends and someone to love. Will they give her the courage to claim the life she deserves, or will her old habits come back to haunt her? So this is perfectly read, a perfect translation from book to audio. And Jessie Cave is best known for her role as Lavender Brown in the Harry Potter films. And then we have one of our own here. I'm calling in from Los Angeles. LA Sun by Roy Choi, narrated by the chef. My Life, My City, My Food. This is the first time available on audio. The book came out in 2013. Roy is a maverick chef and co-founder of the wildly popular Koji barbecue taco trucks. He's paying homage to the city he loves in his own voice with this new cookbook recording. And Library Journal said of the print edition, that Choi folds recipes into his life to make a sort of autobiographical cookbook, a memoir as bold as the flavors in his food. And the audio edition also includes a downloadable PDF with recipes and tools from the book, so that makes it extra enticing. And then we have This Is the Way the World Ends. It's a prep school thriller, perfect for fans of One of Us is Lying and The Hazelwood. Here, listeners are cordially invited to spend one fateful night surviving an elite private school's epic masquerade ball in this debut thriller from Jen Wild. It's a smart spin on dark academia with sharp observations about class, ableism, and power, and it balances an atmospheric thrill ride with really whip-smart social commentary. And the author is already beloved for her commitment to creating unforgettable queer characters who become their own heroes. It's a new listen. In the new listen, the main character has autism, as does the author, and she wants to present the experience as authentically as possible. And then lastly, this is really amazing, written by two educators, primary school educators, Nearer My Freedom, The Interesting Life of Ulata Equiano, by Monica Edinger and Leslie Young. So this is read by Henriette Zotomau and Clifford Samuel. It's perfect for poetry lovers, which I am one, history buffs, and nonfiction readers and listeners, particularly those with an interest in the African American experience. So millions of Africans were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade, but few recorded their personal experiences. Olata Equiano's The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olata Equiano is perhaps the most well-known slave narrative and autobiographies that exist. So using this narrative as a primary source text, the authors have extracted found verse from it, and it's supplemented with annotations to give readers historical context. It'd be perfect for classroom and school libraries. And this poetic approach, which follows Equiano from his life in Africa as a child to enslavement at a young age, his travels across the Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea, and then to his liberation and his life as a free man. Again, the found verse makes it very accessible to middle grade through young adult listeners, and the narrative is centered very much on Black resilience and enslavement. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you found things to recommend and read and listen to, and we will see you on June 7th for our next morning book buzz.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. That was great. See you at Day of Dialogue.